Welcome. This is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. I'm Frank Conkling, and this time we're going to take a look at the ArcGIS parcel fabric and really take a deeper look at some fixing of some bad data. If you stick around long enough, we'll tell you some of the really deep stuff, and hopefully you can get something out of this. Before we go, just at the lower right corner, you'll see a QR code, which will get you to Panda Consulting's website. Panda Consulting, by the way, if you're not sure who we are an ESRI Silver business partner. In addition to the release ready and the state and local government specialty designations, we are also the first company in the United States to receive the parcel management specialty designation. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to look at sort of the simple data structures and then look down further and see what type of issues can you have. The types of issues we're going to really talk about are things such as realignment issues, identifying where we've got really short line segments and such, things like distance mismatch, densified curves. How do you take care of densified curves and fix those in the parcel fabric? And then as we get towards the end of the workshop, we'll go and look even deeper. How do you fix this problem, which is inherent in so many people's parcel fabric, where they've imported data and not everything that they imported is actually related to a record? So before we start fully, just want to let you know, if you are here in person, actually actively on the recording, if you have comments, if you have any questions that you'd like me to address, please go and put it over in the chat window. Chris is actually moderating it, and he will make sure that I stop and address your concerns as we move forward. All right, so let's start out with something that I've actually talked to several of our clients about, and that is parcel realignment, and that they wind up with a parcel, and this is in fact sort of what's happened. They've got a new parcel that's supposed to be there, and it occurs along some sort of natural area, and it does not come anywhere near matching any of the existing data that's in there. And this is really exacerbated when it's along a river area or waterway or something that has a natural boundary on it, because there's no way that you can actually go and use the existing align tools to go and make these things match. They just don't match. No matter what you do, it's not going to work out. So the question is always, well, how do I fix this? How do I get my existing data to get and match exactly what this new data looks like? And how do I do that? Again, if I've got a record and I go in here and try to do a line parcel on here, there's just it's going to be impossible. It's not going to be able to match any of this at all. Well, this is one of those areas where you go and think outside the box a little bit. It's like, okay, well, how are we going to go and do this? And there is a tool that Esri went and put together in the quality driven tab that allows us to go and work with this. And that tool is actually basically using a combination of shrink to seed and reconstruct from seeds. Now, the thing to remember about both shrink to seed and reconstruct from seeds is that it's going to be using the seeds that are already produced, the seeds that you've got existing lines for, or you've got other components on. I'm going to go and clear this out, and I'm going to select instead my two adjacent properties to this parcel. I'm going to unselect my new one that I just built. There's my new alignment. I'm going to unselect that. So I wind up with this old one here. And I'm going to also go and select this adjacent one here, because I know I'm going to do some realignment in here also. All right. And the key to this is making sure that you understand that what shrink to seed does is it takes the existing parcels and reduces them back down to a seed. Now that seed, all right, that seed basically contains all of the attribution of the existing parcel, but it doesn't necessarily go and reflect what those boundaries are. And what we want to do is we want to redefine where those two parcels are. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here. And again, I've got this new parcel here. I really don't care about that boundary. I want these old ones to match that new boundary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select those old lines and the old points here, this line and this line here, and I'm going to delete them. Now, if I delete them with my record active, it's going to mark them as historic. If I go and take and turn my record off, that's going to just delete them out of my database. Now, it was previously you wouldn't want to go and do that because that would not in any way let you go and rebuild this. But in this case, we're going to go and allow this. We also have other concerns here in that we've got this other component on here. And usually we'll go and we'll build this again before we get to this point, but let's leave it at this. I'll take this one and we'll take this one here. When we've deleted the lines there, the key is to recognize that the reconstruct from seed will go and actually take this seed that's there and expand it so that it matches and goes and builds all the way out until it goes and intersects any existing parcel type line that is there already. So in this case, we have used tax parcel lines. All right, we use parcel lines here, and we've taken those parcels and reduced them to seed. And when we go and rebuild this or reconstruct this, it's going to take each of those seeds and expand them until it finds lines that go and close on here. And let's just look at what actually happens when we get done with this. All right, so if I go and say reconstruct from seed now, it will go and rebuild those parcels and expand them all the way until they match what lines I have drawn here. Now, it doesn't mean that these lines get assigned for the record. It's going to, whatever record was on there, it's going to use again. But if I look at here, for example, it's gone and it's built this all the way until this intersection. Let's go and unselect this parcel here and see. It
Frank,
goes in. Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Heather has a good question in the chat. Will this work even if those two adjacent parcels are in different records? I.e., do you need to create duplicate lines where the record boundary is?
No. Well, the answer is yes, it does work, because that's exactly what I have. I have here two different parcels that had different records associated with them. You know, if I can go back and look at it, I will see that this parcel to the north had its record, and this parcel to the south had its own record. And I took them and I went and shrunk them until it was a seed. And that's the key to this whole process, is that reconstruct from seeds doesn't care about the records. It only cares and makes sure that it's going to match exactly the same record type, the same parcel type line. If I had subdivision lines on here, it would not use those to rebuild this parcel. If I have, let's do this. Okay, so let's go and take this parcel here and do a shrink to seed. Now I'm going to do something you shouldn't do. Again, I don't have a record. I'm going to go and just create new line here. There is no record associated with this. All right, no record associated with this. But watch what happens when I do reconstruct from seed. It goes and builds it out to the closest parcel type line, the same line that matches the parcel type of the seed, it goes and rebuilds it out to that. Now, if I had gone and done that, and then I went in and let's undo create the lines in here. All right, let's undo that. So I now have them. It does not matter about the records. Again, we're going to see later that in fact, we're going to find out how can we find lines that don't have records associated with them, which is the bigger problem we have. But this reconstruct from seed is a really interesting tool, and there's just a lot of nuances to it. The first one is that A, you don't need a record. B, it will go and expand those seeds out until it matches an existing line that is of the same type as the seed. So when I do reconstruct from seeds, it will go and rebuild that out. And Heather's also asking a question, is it only available in 3.x? Yes, I believe it is. I don't think it was introduced until 3.1 maybe, or it might have been 3.0 or not. So how do we use it further? We've got this new boundary here. Well, I can take this, all right, and I can say shrink it to seed. It will go and shrink it down to that seed. If I want, I could actually take that seed and say, let's go and activate the record there. And then I could say, select the lines that were part of that record. And I can see there's my lines in here. And let's unselect these lines because we don't want to impact those. And we don't want to impact this. All right, let's go to there. And then over here, let's go to here. And let's delete those old lines that are no longer valid. They're not part of this new alignment in here. All right, let's go and let's zoom out so we see it all. And we can now go and take that off and say delete those lines. Again, I could and I should delete those points also on here. You know, I could just go and select those points and delete them. I'm not going to do all of that, but I just want to go and show you that now that I have a seed that has a valid attribution on it, and it does have a record associated with it, and I have lines that are of the same type, when I go in here and say reconstruct from seed, it will go and build that out again all the way until that in here. So obviously there's a line here I didn't go and include. But yeah, so it built it to there. Let's go and undo that rebuild, that reconstruct from seeds. All right, and let's go and put a line in here. Let's make sure that we make that active. Let's put a line in here. And let's clean this up all the way here. We now have a line that has a seed or that has a record associated with it. It's got a record. So let's clean up this one also. Let's take this parcel, zoom to it. Let's shrink that to seed. All right, now that we have these two, again, we don't have to worry about this. We can do a reconstruct from seed to build the two of them. And reconstruct from seed. I think I might have messed this up here. There's a parcel line. Oh yeah, there it is there. Reconstruct from Seeds. All right. So this is really a powerful tool that sort of gets underutilized because we're not used to thinking of things these ways. The standard type of workflow is you build the lines, you create the seeds, you then go and do the alignment. But sometimes you cannot do the alignment that well, only because these lines that you're replacing are so different. Alignment works really well if you have sort of the same number of lines. But if you've got differing lines and you've got such a different geometry between the two lines, it does not work as well. So think about whether or not you can use this combination. Experiment with it. Think about whether or not you can use this combination of shrink to seed and then do a reconstruct to seed to go and realign things to where you want them to be. Requirements. You need to make sure that as part of this workflow, you have a set of lines which you say, that's the good alignment. Those are the ones I want to go and use, and make sure that those lines are in that position. Then you can go and shrink the seed, eliminate those lines that you don't want anymore, and tell it to reconstruct them with these good lines. And you'll see it's much easier than trying to go and use the alignment tools. All right. This one, it takes a little bit of working with it until you can build up sort of the muscle memory to use it. But oh boy, is this thing really powerful to go and rebuild and help reconstruct some bad data in there. We all have it, so why not look at it? So let's go and look at some other components on here. I've got a couple things in here. One of the things I've done here is I've gone and put in place here some of the new quality control layers that Esri has put in for parcel fabric. Now, again, this only works with parcel fabric, but some of them are on here. We can do a distance mismatch. And that's what this is here, this distance mismatch, in which it allows us to go and find where there's a difference in the distance between what's actually stored on the Kogo and what actually is drawn out in there. There's also one which shows us extra line vertices. Matter of fact, interestingly, if I go in here and look back to that last area that I was in, I can see that that line that I had in here is actually a polyline. It's got multiple vertices in here that do not have points on them. All right. So it's all this line vertices of the parcel lines does is it's showing me where there are vertices that are not on the end of the line. If I wanted to go and make that a Kogo lines, how could I fix that? I could go in there and select that line. I could select that line, not the parcels, but the lines. And I've got another one here. All right, so I just have my two lines in here. I don't want these. I have my two lines. To fix this, and by the way, I personally don't consider this an error or a problem. What I do consider this is that maybe for our natural boundaries, we ought to consider using polylines instead of Kogo lines. But if you wish to go and fix these where it's a polyline and you want to go and make them individual Kogo lines, you can always use the back here all the way down, split into Kogo lines. Be sure to make sure that you set your line template correctly, and then tell it to go ahead and split them all into Kogo lines. You'll go and split them all, calculate the Kogo on them. And when I'm done with this, there will no longer be errors on here. I still want to go and build this, rebuild my area here because they didn't have points on them. So building the that will actually go and build points on them. So we have another question. Does reconstruct from seed make copies of the boundaries, or if found to be the selected layer, would you then wind up with duplicate lines on top of each other? It does not make multiple lines. It only goes and uses existing lines. And again, those existing lines just have to be the same parcel type. They don't even have to have a record on them, but they just have to be the same parcel type, and it will go and expand the seeds out until it actually goes and matches those lines. So it doesn't necessarily create additional duplicates on there. If you've got adjoining parcels, it doesn't do that. Let's go and do another one here. So just sort of to show that I have two parcels here, and I want to go and do a realignment on this. I can take, let's get out of split into lines. I can take this and I can take this, and I can say shrink to seed, just to sort of cover a little bit more. I've got the two seeds here. Now what I can do, and again, I've got no record here. I can take this, take this, take this, take this, and delete them all. Again, with no record, it's not being marked as historic. I can then go in here and I can create a new series of lines. All right, let's snap there, go ahead. All right, now when I do reconstruct from seeds, it will go and rebuild these two parcels to those lines, even though those lines don't have, and in fact, any records associated with them. So one of the dangers, but it does not create new lines. It does not build new lines on there. Doesn't do any of that. What happens when I go and say, go ahead and build this extent? It makes sure that it puts the lines on, or make sure it puts the points on the ends of those lines, but does it duplicate the lines? One line. That's all I have in here. I don't have multiple lines in there. So it's an interesting tool. There are limitations on it, and you've got to make sure that you've got it set up correctly. But when you go and build this, this is a really powerful, powerful tool for helping to go and rebuild some of the issues that we've got in here. I'm going to use that, by the way, because I now have these lines that I just built, and none of those lines actually have any created by seeds. I'm going to show you how to go and correct that later. All right. All right. So where were we? We were looking at some of these. So we were looking at the line vertices, and basically we were over here and we were talking about over here. An interesting question is whether or not we should be using cocoa lines along natural boundaries, such as along waterways here and such. As part of the old ArcMap parcel fabric, each individual line had to have its own cocoa values, so it was putting lines in everywhere. But the reality is, inside of your parcel fabric, inside of ArcGIS, it does not have to have cocoa on it. So if we wanted to, we could take, for example, and I'm just going to go and select these lines in here and do this. Say, well, if I wanted to clean up my data, and let's unselect that poly, let's unselect that, and have that line, how can I go and correct and fix that so it's not, in fact, a set of individual 7 lines? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete those points. Remember, I don't have an active record, so nothing's getting marked historic. And then I'm going to merge them together. I'm going to merge them. And again, doesn't matter which one I do, as long as it merges them into parcel lines, then it's showing me, because of my displaying my vertices, that I have here one single line that does not have any of those components on it anymore. And when I build it, I actually had multiple things in there, but it allows me to go and merge that without having that issue. So one of my thoughts is that maybe with these natural boundaries, we should start using polylines instead of cocoa lines on there. So that's too short on there. What about distance mismatches? When we have a distance mismatch in here, let's go. I think I've got a bookmark here somewhere where I've got a distance mismatch. And on this distance mismatch, if I look at this line here, go to my attributes and say this line, all right, it's actually, the distance says that it is in fact 664.75 feet, but the shape length says it's 680 instead. The question is, how am I going to go and handle this? And my question is this in fact that this 664 is reflective of this overall from here to here? Is that 15 feet equal to this here? Perhaps that line should have been broken and it wasn't, and it kept the cocoa value from this adjacent line instead of this one. So there's no real fix on here other than showing you that's what it is. Let's go and look and see if there's something we can do here. If I go and select that one parcel here, this is my one line. I can go and say that this is actually not from geometry, but maybe this was entered in here. And let's check to see if this line is here. There's another line up here that's 65 feet. It's not 15 feet, it's 65 feet. Maybe it was a mismatch mapping in here. I would start looking at the aerials. I would start looking at the actual source documents to see whether or not that's what actually caused this. But doesn't mean you can fix all of these all the time. The distance mismatch is a good way to go and do sort of a deep down dive into the quality of the mapping to see whether or not you're close within a variance to the actual information that's stored on there. Get out of that. Let's look at the next option here. This next option is densified curves. How are we going to handle densified curves on here? There's a couple of ways to do that. Those of you, if you've followed us and you know we've got one way, an interactive way to go and do this. Let's go back here and get to this area again. Sorry, I actually have a bookmark, but there we go. So on here, we have a series of densified curves. These are lines where it's supposed to be a curve. And if we look at this, it's actually a series of straight lines, here to here, here to here. And it's supposed to be a curve in here. The technique that we use, there's a couple of techniques. I'm going to go and turn on my subdivisions and make sure my historic is on, make sure my historic parcels are on. I think that's all I really need on in here. Yeah. And then show you the technique that we use, because we look at this and say, well, how can we fix this and make sure that it's correct? Let me go and also on here, label this to see whether there's some consensus as far as what these things are supposed to be. All right, so it looks like this has a radius of 206, and it looks like these are all straight lines. If I do a real quick measurement in here, from here to here, it looks like that's probably 45 feet in here. So that, again, if we do a calculation, 206 minus 45 is approximately 161. So what we're going to do is I'm going to assign a radius of 161 for this as I'm going and building it. So here's the steps that we use to go and remove densified curves. First thing you want to do, turn off topology. If you have topology on, it will continue to rebuild these densified curves for you. You don't want to do that. The next thing you do is go over to your modify frame, your modify pane, and go to one of our favorite tools, the Align Features tool. All right. Align Features tool allows us to go and draw a path, and it looks at a buffer or a tolerance and allows us to go and look at every vertex, every feature that's within that tolerance here between, I want to make sure that we're doing this. Let's set our tolerance here a little bit bigger. All right. So let's go and snap here, and I'll go and snap here and snap here. If I just do it this way, and I'll go run through it this one time, and then I'll go and run through it again this other way. When I do this, if I have at the bottom of the align features saying allow aligning features without a selection, so I don't have to select everything underneath here, but I do have it being displayed, I say align this, and it will align every vertex within that tolerance that I just had and make them a curve. So in here, let's go to here. Let's select those. Now I want to unselect the things that I don't want to get rid of. So I'll get rid of all that and I'll delete it. I have no record turned on right now. There's no active record on here. So I'm basically just cleaning this up. I've cleaned it up now. Now when I go in here, I can tell it go ahead and rebuild. Take a look at my records here and rebuild them. And actually it did it without me even doing anything here. I'm going to select those lines in here, those two lines in here and this line here. And I'm going to tell it, go ahead and update my cocoa. On my lines, go ahead and update it. And let's get out of here now. Now on here, remember I said it was 161. Well, this is 165 is what I actually drew it at. Close, but if you want something closer than that, let's undo this. Delete all the way down to there. Okay, so now we have all the densified curve back. We have everything back to where it was. Let me go back to my line features. This time when I do this, I'm going to go and click here, and I'm going to click here. But when I get ready to go and do it, rather than clicking there and snapping, I'm going to type R. R allows me to set what that radius actually should be. So in this case, I'm going to tell it 161.57. All right. So now when I go and do this, it will go and align that 161. Now I can go in here and select all this, unselect, delete it, then go and tell it to rebuild my records, rebuild all the extent in all the records in my extent. Let's go in here again and tell it to go and update my cocoa. There we have 161.57 is actually what I put in there for my radius. So it allows me to go and rebuild this very accurately and actually reflect what is shown on that recorded document, on that deed, on that survey, on that plat, on that CSM, whatever. It allows me to set it and be even a little bit more accurate. The other way to do this is to go in here and select that and use what's called the Slacker tool, the straight lines and curves tool. But that's going and taking it, and it's doing a batch transition into curves for you with no real control on your end. There's a couple of things back and forth you can tweak. We really don't like using that only because there is no control. There is no way to go and say specifically, make it this. And you're changing things that you're not really looking at. We'd rather go and make sure that everything is being looked at. Chris, I see I have also,
Yes, there's
would
a
this
question in
work
the
if
chat.
you were working with only one parcel type? Yes, this works with one or many. The key to it is on the align features pane, whether or not you tell it to go and align features with or without a selection. If you uncheck this, that means that you have to select everything that's going to be changed. Again, usually we'll work with this and have it unchecked completely on here. So again, the key to doing it, to correcting your curves this way is A, making sure you don't have topology. If you have topology on, often what will happen is it will go and pull lines together or pull points together and actually cause it to delete short lines and other features. And the topology engine will give you an error saying, no, that's a violation. You can't do that with topology turned on. So if you are specifically looking to get rid of densified curves, you want to turn off the topology. All right. Big thing. You want to make sure you turn off the topology. Then you want to go make sure that every single layer is turned on, that the historic as together with the current are all turned on any layers that may have a line there. If you've missed anything or you don't have historic turned on also, if you have a historic one that's got densified curves, it will rebuild that densified curves on there. So just be aware of that. You want to be careful with that. But other than that, then you go and rebuild it. If you don't care what that is, you just want it to cartographically look correct, you can just go and click and make sure you click somewhere on it and it will go and do an approximation, but it will be a true curve. It will no longer be densified. If you want to be more exact and actually explicitly state what the radius is, type the R before you go and click on it. Again, the other tool is that we are using the endpoint arc segment to rebuild those curve areas for us. All right. Well, we got one more thing we want to look at. And this is deep stuff. This is things that I've seen this out on the community a couple times. What happens, and let's give some background on here. So in the parcel fabric, if we go and look at our attribute rules that are part of our design, with all due current ArcGIS Pro 2.9, 2.8, and above, on here, there is in fact a must have a record rule that says that every feature that you have inside of your parcel fabric should have a record in the created by records value. So in here, it's basically asking it, is the created by record attribute empty? If it's empty, it means it's a violation of this rule. Think of this as being sort of a topology rule that says not only that you've got to have lines on the polygon boundaries, but You've got to have a record information stored in every single one. And what we're seeing as we're going around, whether somebody built the fabric themselves or whether they had somebody else build it, if they don't understand fully what the implications are, when they go to create a parcel fabric and they build it, it looks good, except that when they go to validate their errors, it goes and lets them know that you've got dozens, hundreds of lines that don't match on here. So I actually have gone in here and said, well, let's look and see, and let's go and symbolize this. Let's go and make this bright red and make it bigger in here so we can see this a little bit more. And let's go and turn off our subdivisions. We don't care about that. I actually do have here. So in here, these lines, they look valid. You know, if we were to go and use shrink to seed and rebuild, they would work. They're fine. But if we look at these individual ones, there is nothing in here by create by record. Where does this come from? Well, it turns out that when you're going to build a parcel fabric, the first thing you do is you go and you put the structure in place, and then you append your existing data into it. And if you append not just your polygons, but also lines, and those lines, when the next process, which is called create parcel records, when the records are created, if it doesn't sense that that line is part of this record, it won't attach it to anything. So you will wind up with, again, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of lines that don't have an associated record with it. And you can see right in here, I've got a couple lines in this one instance where there's no record. It has no record value on here, and it will eventually become a problem on this when you go to validate and sort of, you know, make sure that everything in your parcel fabric is correct. So how do you fix it? Well, there's two ways. I'm going to go and select those. So I have just those two lines in here. I'm going to say just only select these. All right. I only have those two lines in here. There's two ways to fix this. As Tina said, it's nice and easy, or there's nice and rough. Let's do the nice and easy one. In this case, we have COGO values, but we can see that those COGO values from sort of the way they're being displayed, these were from geometry. So they were not part of the original. They were not input by a user at any time. So the way to fix this is take those lines, delete them. All right, now you have no lines on here, but what we can do is we can go and do a rebuild extent, and it goes through and analyzes all of the records inside the extent and looks at the polygons. And there is a record, there is a rule in the topology that says in here, there are topology rules that says that the parcel has to be covered by lines. So the parcel fabric, when you do a build extent, it runs through, looks at every record, looks at all the parcels that are part of those records, and says, if there's not a line, build the line in there for me. So it's going to be adding those things that are missing. So if you don't care, again, I can go in here and do this and select those lines, and I can see now that these two lines that I just built, if I look, oh, they aren't constructed by here. So how do we do this? How do we fix this so that this can completely be rebuilt? We can go in here and we can say, let's take this parcel and activate that record. And then let's take these lines here. And let's get rid of this. Let's unselect that. Let's unselect that. And we can say we can get out of that. We can say take those two lines and assign them to the record. All right. So now when we get done here and look at this, those actually have now created by records on here. This is really tough to do. This is very, very intensive, and it takes a lot of work. The other option, the one that's a little bit harder to do, a little bit more work, is, let's go ahead and get back here. Records. Let's go back to here. So now we have two lines here. These two lines don't have records on them. All right. So we've got a couple lines in there with no records that we want to figure out, what do we do with these two lines? Again, we can delete them, we can assign them, or we can have the software run through a couple of things. One, we can take those two lines and again, just select those two lines on here. And we could tell it to use a geoprocessing tool to go and analyze what polygons are these things next to. And let's see if it'll allow me to do this if I'm editing. I don't know if it will. So there's a tool called a near command. Now what that near command will allow us to do, again, it doesn't matter about this. I can say, take and look at, and here's the near features. Take my lines, in this case, take my parcel lines and see what they're near as far as my parcels. All right, I could tell it, let's make sure it's within a half a foot. And then just go ahead and tell it to go ahead and, as a filter on here, let me make sure I have the parcel lines and not just those others. Those parcel lines. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and do it and find it and tell it to go and tell me what polygons these things are next to. Yeah, it's going to tell me it's being edited. All right, so let's stop editing. Let's go ahead and save these edits in here. So what this tool will do is it will allow me to go and analyze my lines and figure out which ones they're close to. Once it does that, it will go and actually append two fields to my line feature class. One's called feature ID and one's called distance. The feature ID is the important one. It's going to go and put in place there what feature this line is next to, what feature this is close to. From that, we can then go and do a join to the polygon features and say, okay, let's join this one to the polygons that are next to it using the feature ID. And once we're done with that, we can tell it to calculate the created by record of my lines that are missing values to be the created by record of my polygons. And this same technique is used when you're trying to go and build a parcel fabric that has lines that has COGO values on that you wish to restore. You want to make sure that those lines are in there. Matter of fact, this is a really good technique for going and looking at annotation, trying to find what the closest line is to that annotation and making sure that annotation distance is moved over to the line. So let's real quickly just look at this here. And if we look at the data structure of these lines now, at the very bottom, we now have two new fields, one called the near feature ID and one called the near distance. When we actually go and open this thing up, we can do a search. Let's go back here and say, okay, well, where's the near? Here's the near feature ID. And it says that both of these are close to polygon 609. So we can do a join to 609 and have it go and tell us. And again, we can calc the created by record value of the line equal to the created by record of the polygon of the parcel. And in that way, we can actually go in and make sure that all of these have valid record information on them when we're going and making sure that this thing is as accurate, as fully populated, as good as can be. All right, that was a deep dive, maybe deeper than some of you wanted to go, but I wanted to share with you some of the things that we've figured out in using parcel fabrics and using some of the components and seeing some of the errors that you can encounter as you put them in. We've now gone and helped over 50 clients to go and move into the parcel fabric, and we've seen certain things that sort of recur over and over and over. All right, I'm going to stop talking. Are there any other questions? Anything that we have or anything you want to talk about?
Nothing in the chat currently.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully this sort of expands the way you think about your data, the way you think about the issues that you have with your data, and expands how you think about fixing your data. So no more questions. Thanks. I'm going to stop recording.